He said goodbye. He made it clear. It was over. But late at night, your stories still light up with a familiar viewer. He doesn't like your posts. He doesn't comment. But he watches. Every single time. And that's when the confusion creeps in. If he's moved on, why is he still here in the shadows? Why can't he let go, like he said he would? You scroll through your feed, see his name in the viewer list, and your mind starts racing. Is it guilt? Curiosity? Regret? Or something much deeper? The truth is, men rarely let go the way they pretend to. Not when they've seen your soul. Not when they've touched something in you that mirrored what they never faced in themselves. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but grows in size." He's not watching your story. He's watching his own unfinished reflection. When a man leaves, people assume he's done. But in reality, many men don't leave with peace. They leave with pieces. Pieces of who they were with you. The version of himself that felt safe. The part that laughed freely. The part that dared to feel. And now? Now he's searching for those pieces in silence. Not in your arms, not in your texts, but in 15-second glimpses on a glowing screen. You may think he's strong for walking away, but there's a kind of cowardice in silence. The kind that avoids closure, because closure means admitting loss. And admitting loss means confronting the part of himself he projected onto you. You didn't just hold his hand. You held a mirror. And now that you're gone, he's not trying to remember you. He's trying to remember himself. That version of him that only came alive when he was loved by you. People often say, if he wanted to, he would. But what if he wants to and just can't? Because reaching out would mean facing the truth. That he let go of something real. That he abandoned something sacred. That the woman he left was never ordinary. And deep down, he knows. He knows you weren't just another girl. You were the pause between his chaos. The silence in his storm. The home he never learned to live in. So he watches. Not to see if you've moved on. Not to find a reason to come back. But to feel something familiar again. Even if it's fleeting. Even if it's from a distance. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't losing someone. It's realizing you lost the version of yourself that only existed when they were near. And now, every story you post, every photo you share, becomes a quiet reminder. Not of you, but of the man he could have been. The one you saw. The one you believed in. The one he walked away from. So the next time you see his name under your views, don't wonder if he regrets it. He does. Not in words. Not in actions. But in every silent view, he tells you the truth he'll never say out loud. It looks fine. He posts a new gym selfie. He's out with friends, laughing, dancing, moving on, or so it seems. But what if I told you that moving on is often just a performance? A mask worn to avoid the confrontation happening within. Because moving on is not measured by how fast he deletes your photos. It's measured by what happens when he's alone, in the silence, with no audience left to perform for. That's when the illusion breaks. You see, most people don't actually move on. They just move sideways. They jump into distractions, swipe right on strangers, numb the echoes with noise, because to sit with the truth would be too heavy. Carl Jung believed that the psyche is always seeking wholeness, and when a bond is broken before integration, the soul feels incomplete. That's what he's running from. Not you, but the emotional wholeness you once triggered in him. Something he didn't know how to keep. Something he was never taught to hold. So he calls someone else. It drinks. It jokes. He even loves again. But every woman he meets from this point forward will be measured not against you as a person, but against the feeling of being seen that only you gave him. Because it wasn't about the relationship. It was about the reflection of a version of him that only existed through you, a version he can't recreate on his own. And that's the cruel part. He may not even realize it. He may believe he's over you, but his subconscious knows. When someone mentions your name, he changes the subject too quickly. When your song plays, he skips it faster than he used to. When he sees someone who looks like you, his heart stutters just for a second. Those are not signs of healing. They are signs of hiding. Jung said, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life." So even if he pretends to forget you, he will meet your essence again and again, in different bodies, different cities, different moments. And none of them will feel quite right. Because when someone walks away from something real, they carry the absence with them. It follows them like a shadow, not to haunt, but to remind. Remind them of what was unfinished, unintegrated, unclaimed. You became a chapter he never closed, a doorway he slammed shut but never locked. So the air still passes through, and your presence still lingers, soft but undeniable. So no, he's not over you. He's just over talking about you. Because the deeper the wound, the more silence surrounds it. And when people tell you he's moved on, what they really mean is, he's learned to pretend. But don't mistake performance for peace. Real closure doesn't come from deleting someone. It comes from confronting the part of yourself that still aches in their absence. And that part of him still remembers. Not the fights, not the ending, but the version of himself that once felt alive in your presence. So the next time someone says he's fine, remember this. He may be smiling in the daylight, but in the quiet of night, your name echoes louder than ever. He didn't fall in love with you. He fell in love with the way you reflected something he had long forgotten. You were not just a woman. You were a mirror. And what he saw in you was not only beauty or kindness. He saw potential. He saw softness. He saw a version of himself that had been buried beneath years of armor. You didn't just look at him. You saw through him. And that terrified him more than anything. Because most people aren't afraid of being unloved. They're afraid of being seen. Carl Jung described this projection as a psychological phenomenon. He believed that we often fall in love, not with a person, but with what they reflect back to us. We project our anima, the inner feminine, the nurturing, the intuition, the soul. And when you came into his life, he didn't understand why he felt so drawn to you. It wasn't logic. It wasn't timing. It wasn't even compatibility. It was resonance. You touched a frequency inside him he didn't know he was capable of feeling. And suddenly, he was softer, more open, more alive. But only for a while. Because being with a mirror is not always comfortable. Mirrors don't lie. They don't flatter. They reveal. And what you revealed was the gap between who he was and who he was pretending to be. He began to see the cracks, the unresolved wounds, the unspoken fears, the boy beneath the man. And the truth is, not everyone is ready to see themselves. So he pulled away. He blamed timing. He said he needed space. He said you were too intensy, too emotional, too much. But what he really meant was this. You were too honest, too real, too close to the truth he wasn't ready to face. Loving you was not just about connection. It was confrontation. You made him feel not just love, but grief, shame, tenderness, I hope. All the things he learned to suppress, to survive. You see, some men are not afraid of commitment. They are afraid of collapsing. Because you didn't just love him. You called him out of hiding. You reminded him that there was more. More to feel. More to say. More to become. And that is overwhelming for someone who built his identity on control. So when he left, he wasn't running from you. He was running from the reflection. Jung believed that the greatest relationships are those that help us become whole. But wholeness requires breaking. It requires seeing the shadow, owning the fear, integrating the lost parts. You were offering that. Not with words, but with presence. And that presence lingers. Because when a man walks away from a mirror, he doesn't forget the image. It follows him. In quiet moments. In sudden dreams. In the eyes of someone new who doesn't quite reach the depth you did. So no, he will not tell you this. His pride will not allow it. But deep down, he knows. You were never just a chapter. You were the turning point. The moment the illusion cracked. The flash of truth in a life full of lies. And while he may never return to the mirror, he will always remember the reflection. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. You showed him who he could be. And that, more than anything, is what he regrets losing. There's a moment in every man's life when he meets someone who shakes the foundation. Not by yelling, not by controlling, but simply by being. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't demand anything. You just showed up with your truth. And that alone was enough to shatter the illusion he built around himself. What you triggered wasn't fear of you. It was fear of himself. Carl Jung believed that every human carries what he called the shadow. It's not the darkness we show the world. It's the darkness we hide. From others, from ourselves. And when someone sees us clearly, without judgment, it threatens the very mask we've worn for years. The one that says we're fine, we're strong, we're in control. You didn't touch his body. You touched his shadow. You spoke softly, but your presence made the walls tremble. Because in your love, he felt seen. And in that seeing, he also felt exposed. He began to realize there were parts of him still wounded. Parts that never healed. Parts that still cried out in silence. The boy who never felt safe. The man who always felt like he had to prove something. The soul that feared softness was weakness. And you were the mirror and the medicine. The light and the trigger. He may have told you that you were too much. Too deep. Too intense. Too emotional. But the truth is, you were too honest for a world he learned to survive by lying to himself. He didn't know how to hold a woman who saw through the performance. He only knew how to chase validation, not depth. He knew how to be desired, not known. And then you came along, not asking for perfection, not asking him to be more, but simply holding space for what already was. And he couldn't handle it. Not because you were wrong, but because the version of him that could have loved you properly had never been born yet. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That's what you did. You brought the unconscious to the surface. You awakened the silent screams, the fears of abandonment, the guilt he buried, the questions he never dared to ask. And now, even though you are gone, the work you began inside him has not stopped. It haunts him, not like a ghost, but like a song stuck on repeat. A feeling he can't name. A restlessness he can't explain. He tries to move on, but nothing fits quite right. No laughter feels the same. No eyes look back at him with the same recognition. Because what you offered wasn't just love. It was invitation. An invitation to grow, to evolve, to become. And he said no. Not because he didn't want it, but because he wasn't ready. Not then. Maybe not ever. But readiness and regret often walk side by side. And while he may never come back, he will always remember the woman who showed him himself. Not the polished self, but the real one. The one that cries, the one that questions, the one that feels. You triggered a part of him he spent years avoiding. And even if he tells the world he's fine, even if he pretends you were just a phase, he knows deep down, you were the beginning of his becoming. And sometimes, that's the most painful loss of all. Not the relationship, but the version of yourself you could have been if only you had stayed in the presence of someone who truly saw you. You said nothing. No long messages. No closure speech. No begging. No final monologue. You let him go. And in that silence, you spoke louder than you ever had. Because silence, when it's chosen not for sadists, not emptiness, it is presence. It is strength. He expected noise. He expected K's. He expected you to react like everyone else had. But you didn't. You vanished, like the tide, quiet, consistent, irreversible. And that shook him. Because silence isn't absence. It's pressure. It forces reflection. It fills the space where distractions once lived. It removes the comfort of being chased. Carl Jung once said, in all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, A secret order. That's what your silence became. A mirror he could no longer smash. A stillness he could no longer avoid. A question he couldn't answer with anyone else's words. When you stopped speaking, he had to listen to his own thoughts. And that was terrifying. You see, silence has a way of peeling back the performance. It reveals who we are when the audience leaves. And for him, what was left was guilt, confusion, and echoes. Echoes of things he didn't say. Moments he dismissed. Ways he took you for granted. At first, he was relieved. He mistook your silence for surrender. He thought you had nothing left to say. But silence, true silence, is not surrender. It is a boundary. It is sacred ground. It's where self-worth lives. And you chose it not because you didn't feel, but because you felt too much. And you finally realized that explaining your value to someone who couldn't see it was a betrayal of your soul. So you stopped talking. You stopped trying. And in doing so, you became unforgettable. Because now, he checks his phone, and there's nothing. No new messages. No, I miss you. No signs of weakness. Only space. Only silence. And that silence is not empty. It is filled with everything he ignored. Every truth you never screamed. Every boundary you now protect. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need to prove anything. Your absence did the work. Your silence said, I loved you deeply, but I will not beg to be seen. And now he feels it. The stillness. The weight. The loss. Not because you shouted, but because you didn't. Not because you chased, but because you didn't. Your silence became a language he never learned to understand. A language of dignity, of self-respect, of quiet revolution. And now, he's left wondering, is she really gone? Does she still think of me? Was I ever enough? But the truth is, he had his chance to ask those questions out loud. Now, he has to answer them in the silence you left behind. He won't say it. He won't message you at 2 a.m. He won't call when he's drunk. He won't type your name into the search bar. At least, not when someone's watching. But when no one's around, when the noise fades, when he's left alone with his own mind, the silence becomes unbearable. He scrolls past your photo, pretending it doesn't sting, pretending he didn't pause, pretending his chest didn't tighten just a little. But it did. He sees you laughing in a story. He sees that light in your eyes. That light he once had a front row seat to. And for a second, he forgets how to breathe. Not because you're gone, but because you're still glowing without him. He didn't expect that. He thought you would fall apart. He thought you would reach out. He thought silence meant hesitation, not evolution. But you didn't break. You bloomed. And that is what haunts him. He won't say it aloud, but he wonders if anyone else will see you the way he did. If they'll notice how your eyes soften when you care, how you go quiet when you're hurting, how you laugh with your entire soul when you feel safe. And he knows now, he never made you feel safe. He thought love was control. He thought distance was strength. He thought silence was power. But now, you are the one who is silent. And he is the one who can't escape the noise inside his own chest. Carl Jung believed that emotions buried alive never die. They resurface in dreams, in behaviors, in moments of unexplained sadness. That's what he lives with now. The lingering ache, the restless nights, the questions he cannot ask. Does she miss me? Did I mean anything? Was I the reason she changed? And he will try to answer those questions by distracting himself. With work, with people, with moments that don't carry your name. But nothing fits the same. No voice calms him like yours. No touch reaches him the way you once did. Because you weren't just a chapter. You were the turning point. The scene he keeps replaying. He won't tell his friends. He won't say, I still think about her. I wonder if she thinks about me. I hope she's okay. Instead, he'll laugh. He'll change the subject. He'll scroll past your photo and pretend he didn't stop. But deep inside, beneath the surface, in that place he never lets anyone see, he feels everything. He regrets what he never said. He mourns what he never gave. And he fears more than anything that he'll never find that kind of love again. Not because you were perfect, but because you were real. And now, every moment he lives without you, he lives with that quiet knowing that he had something rare, something sacred, and he let it go. You were not his mistake. You were not his phase. You were not the girl he tried to forget after a few sleepless nights and a few shallow connections. You were the beginning, the moment everything shifted, the crack in the surface, the flicker of truth in a life lived half asleep. He may have called it love, but what you were was a mirror to his soul, a light that exposed the shadow he had kept hidden for years. He didn't understand it at the time. Maybe he still doesn't, but one day, he will wake up in the middle of the night, and he won't be thinking about how you made him feel. He'll be thinking about who he was when he was with you, and how that version of himself felt closer to truth than any other version since. Because you didn't just hold his hand, you held his becoming. You made him face himself. Not with pressure, but with presence. You asked questions he wasn't ready to answer. You created a space where he could be soft, but he ran from it, because he was taught that softness was danger. That love was a transaction. That silence meant safety. But you broke all of that. You showed him that real love doesn't scream. It listens. It sees. It waits. It stands still and says, I will not shrink just so you can feel tall. And that, more than anything, was the awakening. Carl Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And sometimes, that becoming begins with losing the person who first saw you clearly. You were not just a lover. You were the turning point in his story. The moment before everything changed. But he didn't realize it then. He mistook depth for danger. He mistook vulnerability for weakness. He mistook your strength for instability. So he left. Not because you were too much, but because you were too real. And real requires courage. Now, he walks through life with a scar that looks like your name, a memory that doesn't fade, not because of how you looked, but because of what you represented. He will search for you in the laugh of another woman. He will look for pieces of you in late-night conversations, in familiar glances, in songs that once meant nothing and now mean everything. But he won't find it, because what you gave wasn't a role. It was a mirror, and mirrors don't follow people. They wait. They stay still. They reflect. And if one day he grows enough, if one day he sheds the mask, faces the shadow, learns to sit in silence without shame, he may finally understand what you were. Not a lesson, not a punishment, but an invitation to become. You see, love like yours doesn't just vanish. It transforms. It ripples into future choices, into how he holds the next person, into how he speaks to his future children, into how he finally starts telling himself the truth. That's what real impact looks like. You were never just a girl. You were a voice in the quiet, a pause in the chaos, a breath in the war zone of his mind. You didn't come into his life to complete him. You came to awaken him. And whether he rises or not, that awakening already happened. And you don't need to wait for him to realize it. You don't need the apology, the closure, the final words, because your power was never in being remembered. It was in being real. You were not the one who lost. You were the one who revealed. So if he ever returns, if he ever stands at your door with eyes full of realization, you'll know he didn't come back for you. He came back for the version of himself he could only reach through you. And that is your legacy. Not as his regret, not as his memory, but as his awakening,